Hello everybody, my name is Volker. I'm with Autodesk Product Support. I'd like to thank you for joining me in this AutoCAD Hangout session on precision drafting using OSNAPs and OTrack. So, object snaps. These are drawing aids which are used to pick precise points in AutoCAD. So, they're meant to be enabled when needed and disabled when not needed. AutoCAD itself allows you to pick a point with 15 decimal place accuracy. Okay, so if you're just doing this by eye, it's not going to work very well. You're going to make mistakes. So object snaps will acquire those points for you. Now there are two types of OSNAPs. One's called a running OSNAP. This runs continuously in the background when enabled. You can access settings for these OSNAPs, which ones are enabled, which ones are disabled, using the drafting settings dialog or dsettings command. The F3 function key will also enable or disable these OSNAPs. You also have a status bar icon available to you, which is a shortcut to all of these settings, either the dialog itself, enabling or disabling one or all of the running OSNAPs. Just a quick way to access those tools. In addition to running OSNAPs, we have what are called Osap Overwrites, and they do exactly that. They override any running OSNAPs. So, a running OSNAP may be set for center of a circle, end point of a line, midpoint of a line. Well, what if you need the quadrant, one of the 4 compass points of a circle, and you don't have that set as a running OSNAP? Well, that's where an override comes in. You could type in QUA for quadrant in order to override your running OSNAPs and select that quadrant point. You could also use the right mouse click shortcut menu, or even shift right mouse click at any time. The one thing to keep in mind is, in order for OSNAPs to work, you do have to be in a draw or modify command. Working side by side with OSNAPs is a drawing aid called tracking, and we have object tracking, polar tracking, and temporary tracking. Object tracking allows me to reference a point in a drawing and then continue line work X amount of units away from that object without having to draw a construction line. You'll see what I mean in a bit. It also runs continuously in the background when enabled. It does require a running OSNAP. You may need to modify polar snap or polar tracking, as it's also called, either by changing an angle or by enabling or disabling that function using F10. I'll talk more about modifying that angle as we move along. The drafting settings dialog will also control these drawing aids, and object tracking can be enabled or disabled using the F11 function key. Again, you can access all of these through the status bar icon. Just like with Osap Overwrites, we have a tracking override. Now, the reason we have this is because if you don't have a running OSNAP, you can't use object tracking. So if you're using a OSNAP override, in order to reference a point, you'd have to use temporary tracking. That should come clear as we work through one of the demos. Temporary tracking is also a one-time use. You can access it from the command line by typing TT. This is actually the preferred method in order to make things work smoothly. However, it does work using the right mouse click shortcut menu or Shift right mouse click. So having said that, let's go ahead and go into AutoCAD and take a look at some of the settings for using or working with object snaps. Now the first settings I'm going to show you are actually in the options dialog, and we will visit this now, and I'll visit it again a little later. I'm going to get into options by right mouse clicking over the command line and selecting options, and then I'm going to go to the drafting tab. Here's how we can change things to display how we want things to appear on the screen. And this is the default setting. I had disabled this full screen tracking vector. The tracking vector is think of it as an imaginary line that's going to be displayed across the screen as you're referencing points. Here we can enable or disable all those tracking vectors as well as the associated tooltips. We can also disable a marker, which is a symbol that appears. So this symbol right here would be for an endpoint. If we did not want to see that, I encourage you to leave this on though, as well as the magnet, which snaps to an endpoint or center, whatever the case may be. You can display the auto snap aperture box. You don't really need it though. What you do need to be aware of is the aperture size, because the aperture is what determines how far away you are from an object when you are wanting to reference it or snap to it. The default settings are typically good. I would encourage you to leave them for the time being, but you can always modify them to make it a little easier to work with your O snaps. You can also change the color of the markers through the colors dialog. I'm going to leave things as they are right now. I'm going to click apply and OK. And let's take a look at some additional settings and where we can access our functions. On our status bar, we have the OSNAP toggle. Just clicking it on or off, clicking on it will turn it on or off. And note, in 2015, it actually tells us that it is off. I'm going to turn it back on. Here we have Auto Snap, which is the object snap tracking. Again, we could click on it to turn it on or off. And here we have polar tracking. It is also on at this time. And right next to them, there are little down arrows, and here you can change settings. 90 degrees for polar is actually the default. And I'll show you what the polar tracking is in a few moments. Again, you could do the same thing for O-snaps. So this is what I mean here. We can enable several different O-snaps. By default, some are already turned on, and you may want to change that, and you can easily do that just by selecting it from the menu. There's a little drawing here that's kind of nice because it shows you for a circle or arc, you would see this marker for the center point, these type of markers for the end point. I know they're not that clear, but it does give you a reasonable representation. You can also go into the Object Snap Settings dialog here. Here we could select all of these or clear them all. O-snaps are meant to help you, so I would encourage you not to select all of them. 3 or 4 should be sufficient for any task you're doing. You can always modify them as you are working. If you have too many of these set, you're actually going to interfere with your drawing work, your line work, because in a condensed area, you're going to be snapping to points you don't really want. You could also enable or disable your object snap tracking or your O-snap. Excuse me. And polar tracking, of course, can be turned off under the polar tracking tab. Here we also have markers representing what the OSNAP marker will look like, or symbols representing what the OSNAP marker will look like. Some of the nice ones that a lot of people don't really use are parallel and extension. Those can be very valuable, and I will be demonstrating those, as well as endpoint, midpoint, center, quadrant, and tangent. And you may have already, as I said earlier, have used some of these because they are set in as a default when installing AutoCAD. So I'm not going to go over all of them, just the ones I think you'll find will demonstrate how these tools work, these drawing aids. Right now I'm going to go ahead and select endpoint, midpoint, center, and node because those are my preferred ones. I leave these on all the time because again I can modify them. I'm going to click OK. So for my first example as to how these work, I'm going to create this particular drawing. And I have one that I will be starting with right here. So this is what it looks like now. This is what it's going to look like after I'm done. And as you can see, I need to add a couple of smaller circles, some line work running parallel, a gap here, and then some line work attaching on the tangents of these circles. So there is a difference here. We have the OSNAP available for quadrant as well as for tangent. Okay, now quadrant is going to select the 4 compass points of a circle: north, south, west, east. Tangent just gives you a nice flush edge on the circle. So let's see how these work. Again, I've gone ahead and set my preferred OSNAP, so they're not necessarily the ones I'm going to need. I'm going to need 4 tangent points plus 2 tangent points on the inner circle. That's 6 of them, but I'm going to do those using Osap Overwrites just so you can see the repetition. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into the line command. Oops, I need the line command. There we go. And I'm going to bring my cursor next to the circle. Now notice that the circle itself is being selected for the center point. That's because that's my running OSNAP. Well, I need to override this, and the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to shift right mouse click, and that brings up this pop 0 menu, as it's called. It's a quick access menu in AutoCAD that's been around forever and a day. And I'm going to go ahead and select quadrant. So as soon as I've done that, even though previously it's wanted to go to the center point, it's now overriding that center point and going to the quadrant of the circle. So I'm going to pick that, and notice how quick it just snapped right to that point. Not a lot of brain power needed at all. And now I'm going to go over here to the rectangle or the line work and see how it's referencing midpoint. But as I scoot up a little bit, and let me zoom in, notice how it's wanting to jump to the end point of my line work. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that point. Then I'll go ahead and finish the line command by hitting enter. And then I'm going to go ahead and repeat the line command. And again, shift right mouse click for the quadrant. Pick, and there we go, real quick like. I'm zooming out a bit. Now, I need to have the next point be on this line work here. But as you can see, it goes to end point and midpoint. I want it to be perpendicular. And just by sheer coincidence, we do have a perpendicular OSNAP. And again, I'm using this as an override, shift right mouse click. And now it brings up a perpendicular marker and the tooltip. And I can move anywhere along here, but it's only going to snap to that point perpendicular. Cool, huh? All right, so I've canceled the line command. I'm going to go ahead and draw the two circles now. So I'm going into the circle command. This time I don't need to use an override because it's already finding the center of that circle. Note that I'm not in the middle of the circle. There's nothing in here. It's not going to reference that. Yes, I can go directly to the center. It'll find it there. I find it just as easy to go to the edge of the circle, or if it's an arc, and acquire the center point. So if I zoom in like this, even though I can't see the center, if the aperture finds the center point, all I have to do is pick, and I have the center point for my new circle, which will be a diameter. I believe it was 1. Yes, 1. So I've quickly placed that. I'm going to repeat the circle command by hitting enter, finding the center point, pick, enter to accept the last value used, and I've placed my second circle. Right, now I need my lines running at an angle. So I'm going to go into the line command. Again, it's referencing the center. So I want to go ahead and shift, right mouse click, tangent, and notice the marker. So it'll snap any point right now where my cursor is near. So I'm just going to go pick right there. But notice as I'm going in this direction that it remains flush on that circle. Kind of zoom in here. See how that works? Pretty nice. Doesn't leave any of these overlaps or undershoots. Shift right mouse click, tangent, pick, and notice how flush that is too. I'll finish the line command. I'll repeat the line command. Shift right mouse click, tangent, shift right mouse click, tangent. And yes, this took me a little longer because I was using overrides. I could have set those as running OSAPs. Typically I would. Alright, so we have one more item to do here in this drawing, and that's this line work. Running parallel and then at an angle tangent on the circle. This is 3 units long with a 3-unit gap and a 3-unit long line work. So I'm not going to do any trimming. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and draw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the line command, and I'm going to go ahead and pick the center point of the circle. Now, right now I'm just going to would just be placing this in an arbitrary direction really. It may look right, but it's not going to be. I want it parallel to one of these two lines. Right now, it's going to the midpoint if I bring my cursor up there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to shift right mouse click and select parallel. And what that does, it will place a marker. I'm not going to pick here. I'm just placing a marker by hovering. It acquires the point. All right, and be careful here. If you were to zoom out or in, you lose that acquired point. You can reacquire. We're still in that parallel function. If you decided that's not the line you wanted, just move your cursor over it. It unacquires. I do need this though, so I'm going to acquire the point. As soon as I bring my crosshair down, it shows me a parallel tip and that tracking line, which is that green line. Okay, this is our tracking vector. I only need this to be 3 units long, so I'm going to use what's called direct distance entry. All that means is I point in the direction I want to draw or move an object, and I type in the distance. So I'm going to type 3, enter, and it's drawn a line 3 units long in that direction. I'll finish the line command. Because I now need a line 3 units long, or excuse me, a gap 3 units long from the end of this line to the beginning of the next line. So again, I'll repeat the line command. But this time, I'm going to say, look, if this were to extend 3 units in this direction, where would my new line work begin? So that's what we'll do. We're going to go Shift, right mouse click, and we're going to select Extension. This puppy right here. What I'm going to do is just hover over this endpoint and acquire the extension. See how that just brings that vector out? Well, that's showing me the direction the line's traveling. Tells me how long that extension is right now. I only need 3 units, so again, direct distance entry, 3, enter, and it starts the line work 3 units away from the original. Shift right mouse click, parallel, reference, down, and then again 3, enter. Shift right mouse click after this to get the tangent point here. Pick, enter to finish, repeat by hitting enter, pick my start point, shift right mouse click, tangent, pick, enter to finish. And that was pretty quick. Didn't draw any construction lines, but I was accurately able to place the points on the drawing. So that's our first OSnap example, and I hope it's going to be helpful for you. It takes practice and getting into a rhythm, but once you are and have found a rhythm, then your life will be a lot easier with these tools, yes. Let's take a look at the object tracking, or OTrack. So here's a finished drawing. And again, OTrack allows me to also reference points, but it allows me to place items without drawing construction lines. For example, this rectangle. We have a circle here in the center. I'm going to erase the circle. And I really like using this simple example to demonstrate the power of object tracking. One of the questions I present to my students is, how would you place a circle in the centroid of this rectangle? Most of the time I'm going to get this answer. Well, I would draw a line from corner to corner, or maybe even midpoint to midpoint. Then I would draw a circle, pick the midpoint of the line, and place my circle. Of course, then I need to erase that line work. That's a lot of work. In fact, I worked up a sweat doing this. I have a much easier way to do this, and that's with object tracking. Again, I'm going to go ahead and erase this. And this time I'll go into the circle command. And what I'm going to do, because I have a running OSnap of midpoint and object tracking enabled, I'm going to reference this midpoint. I'm not picking here. I'm just hovering and I'm letting it acquire the point. Then I'm going to go over to one of the vertical lines and do the same thing. Not picking, just acquiring the point. I move my cursor over to the center. When I see the intersection of those 2 points, I pick and place the circle. That easy and fast. One thing, you may have noticed the tracking vectors going across the screen, right? Both vertically and horizontally. This is where I'm going to go back into options, because I do prefer to not display that full screen tracking vector. Let me show you how that works. Let's get rid of this real quick. Circle, reference, reference, and notice how the tracking vectors go from my acquired points to my cursor or crosshair. And this is just my preference, but whatever works for you. You just need to know where the settings are. Pick, enter. There we go. All right, so this is what I'm going to do for this example. I'm going to draw this. And basically, I'm just going to put the circles in here. And I know it's very simplistic, but it'll show you the power of object tracking as well as temporary tracking. So, going back to this drawing here, I need these two circles, which have a diameter of 1, and these 4 circles, which have a diameter of half a unit. And let me just verify that. I opened up the property palette by using Control 1. And yeah, half of a unit for the diameter. So let's go back to this one. All right, real easy. I've gone ahead and actually, let me make one change. Almost forgot. I'm just going to put this on end point because I'm going to demonstrate the temporary tracking and Osap Overwrites. All right, so we're going to go into the circle command, and we're going to go ahead and place these corner circles first. Reference and acquire, reference and acquire, pick. And then D for diameter, 0.5. All right, easy, huh? Fast. I'm going to repeat the circle command, reference and acquire, pick, enter to accept the default size of the last circle. Very quick. Now the next one's a little trickier because I only have endpoint as a running Osap. Yes, I can set a midpoint for the reference, midpoint and midpoint, but I'm going to use overrides. So I could choose from the shortcut menu, temporary tracking, when I do this, but I do prefer to type in TT as well as the Osap. And the command line is very fast. This is something, if you aren't using the command line, you might take a shot at it and start typing in commands if you're looking for improved speed in getting your work done. Not saying all these other methods aren't fast. But anyway, the reason I'm going to type stuff in is because remember how I said or demonstrated even, that if you zoom in or out, you can unacquire a point accidentally, or if you move your cursor over an acquired point, it can be unacquired by moving the cursor over it again. Well, sometimes when using the shortcut menu, it will actually unacquire the points for you, and that can be annoying. So at this resolution where I don't have a lot of screen space, because I would normally move my cursor over to the side for this menu, I'm just going to type in the functions and it'll demonstrate it that way as well. So basically I need to acquire midpoints, which I don't have set as a running Osap. So I'm going into the circle command, and the first thing I need to do is, look, I can't acquire this, so I need to use a temporary tracking point. So I'm going to type TT, enter, and then it says, okay, where's that temporary tracking point going to be? And I'll say I'd like to reference a midpoint. So I type MID. Once I've done that, I bring my crosshair over the midpoint and it's finding it. But unlike object tracking, I physically need to pick this point in order to acquire it. So I'm going to pick, and it's acquired that point. Again, TT, enter, MID, enter, pick to acquire the midpoint, find the intersection, pick, and then D for diameter, 1, enter. Again, very fast though, even though it's a little longer process. Let's do it one more time. So again, TT, enter, MID, enter, and again, all that was done after going or repeating the circle command. I'm going to pick to acquire, again, TT, enter, MID, enter, pick to acquire, pick, enter to accept the default last settings, and voila. Nice, huh? Very fast, no construction lines. Let's take a look at one more item. Here we have two circles. Now there's no midpoint here that they're referencing, obviously. So how did I do this? Well, what I did was I actually changed the O-track mode. By default, O-track is set to ortho mode in AutoCAD. And actually, I believe I still have mine set at the modified setting. We'll see in a minute, though. But by default, everything is vertically or horizontally done. Now, if you want, you can go into that object snap tracking. You actually need to go into polar tracking, though. You go into those settings, and you want to change it from the default. Yeah, I did have it on the last setting I used. You want to change it from this default to track using all polar angles. Okay, so I'm going to set it to that. Plus, I'm not going to want to go at 90 degrees, which is the default as well. I'm going to change this to 45. Now the 45 degrees, clicking OK here, I could have easily set here. Okay, but in order to change the angles themselves to go other than ortho, I had to go into the dialog itself. So either way, having done that, what I can now do is place those two circles. So I'll go into the circle command, reference. I'm only hovering this time because my endpoint is a running OSNAP. And notice the tracking vector at an angle, and again, direct distance entry. It's telling me right now I'm 1.4142 units away at an angle of 45 degrees. I only need to be 1 unit away for the center point of that circle. 1, enter, and then we'll go ahead and set a diameter of 0.5. I could have typed in 0.25 for the radius, obviously. Many ways to get things done. Let's repeat that. Reference, this time it shows 225. Again, I'm going to type 1, enter, and enter to accept the circle command's default settings. So, there are things to be aware of when working with these functions. You need to get into a rhythm of using them. You need to know they're there. You know, that's the bottom line. You'll never use them if you don't know they're there. So, I encourage you to explore these functions if you haven't already. I do believe you'll be a lot more productive and you will be a lot more accurate using these tools. Alright, well, thank you again for viewing this video. I do hope that it is helpful to you. I hope you're going to be a lot more productive and accurate in your work after having watched this. Please keep an eye out. We'll be posting webinars in the future as well as videos for you to get a better understanding, or maybe even just to help you remember some of the functions that are in AutoCAD. Have yourself a great day. Thank you.